You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I'm your host, Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue. Now, I know I often say it, but this is a really packed show this week with our main interview, then 3 new members of the Mighty Blue class of 2024 for you all to meet, plus another chapter of Emily Leonard's book, Happy Hiking. First up, we're going to meet Florence Bradley, or Fireflo, a very tough retired fire officer who had plenty to overcome as she hiked the AT last year, finishing up this year within the 12-month window for a completed through hike. Florence tells a story of resilience, which you could probably expect from a retired firefighter. Florence will be on in a moment. Then we hear from Michael Gaasch, who I'd hoped to introduce to you all last week, but I lost the recording. Michael was a good sport about it and came back on for a second go round. Happily, I didn't lose this one. Then we're going to meet Anita Gschwendtner, or Moxie, another one of those awesome women on the trail who just embraced the entire experience. Finally, in the class of 2024 section, we'll meet David Vose, or Professor Milkshake, who's out there getting it done as a sabbatical from his job. Then we're going to get the next chapter from Emily's book, so plenty to get into. Let's start off by meeting Florence Bradley, or Fireflo. Our guest today is a flip-flopper. This is Florence Bradley, or Fireflo. Hey Florence, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
And I need to immediately apologise for the technical difficulties we've had trying to make this work today, but I can hear you fine and you seem to be able to hear me fine, so hopefully it's all going to work out.
I hope so too. It was
yes.
They were all on my end, by the way.
So you've gone and done what the Appalachian Trail Conservancy is encouraging people to do. You flipped. What was your thinking behind that choice?
Well, initially I planned to do it as a no-boat. It was always my dream to do that. And then about 2 or 3 years prior, I talked to a couple ladies who were interested in doing it as a flip-flop. And I said, well, let me research that, see what's involved. Right. And the more I read about it, the more I thought, this would be great because you're not in a huge bubble. I think the weather works out better. And, and just the fact that you're not in a lot of crowds. And so, the resources don't get kind of jammed up at times. Right.
But you actually, I'm going to come to that in a minute when you started, but it obviously worked out for you because you made it. I
made it, yeah.
So it was a great choice for you. But was there a moment as you climbed Katahdin that you thought, I get it, this is the epic finish?
Oh, definitely. There's absolutely no doubt that finishing on Katahdin, you get a much, much bigger endorphin rush than you do at finishing in Harper's Ferry.
You can see that by observations, could you?
I could definitely see that. And I did it, and I totally enjoyed my moment on Katahdin, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But it was raining. It was cold that day. There were no views. 2 days later, my friends who finished on the 14th of September, oh my God, they could see forever from up there. And all my big scenic views this past year were pretty much in the rain. Like Mount Washington, every time I've been to the top of Mount Washington, it's been hurricane force winds.
But you and the majority of people who go up there. But I must say, I've had great weather each time I've been up there as well. So, I feel I've always been lucky there. So
you have. I'm so jealous.
So, yeah, and actually, we've actually talked about this on the show before about the importance of taking your views, not just walking past those views, taking your views when you've got them, because they may not be there in about 5 minutes, in fact, sometimes.
Oh, especially in the whites. Oh my gosh, the weather changes so fast up there.
Absolutely. So what got you out there in the first place? Had you been hiking much over the years, or has this been a long time in coming?
Actually, I have. I've been hiking probably 15 years prior to that.
Right.
I had a Girl Scout troop for 11 years, and we went hiking and backpacking and stuff. About 3 years ago, I co-founded a women's outdoor club here in Alabama.
Nice.
And our primary thing now is hiking and camping. And I think there are a couple of people who have through hiked other trails or done significant portions of the AT on it. But our core group, most of them are not hardcore backpackers.
Right. Well, you know what? Nobody needs to be a hardcore backpacker, do they?
No, they don't.
This is, any time you get out for 2 days, 1 day, even half an hour, it's a great feeling for you. And you've got to find your place in that environment, haven't you? Really.
You really do. And like this weekend, it's so hot. So I've been getting out at 7 a.m. and going out to Oak Mountain State Park, and I did like 7 miles on Saturday and 5 miles yesterday. And by 10:30, the heat index is over 100 degrees, so it's pretty miserable.
Well, remember, I come from Florida, so
Oh, you know all about it.
I know all about it. So, what was it then about the AT itself that drew you to it? Because America is blessed with some very long trails. It doesn't have to be the AT. Was the AT always going to be the one you wanted to do?
Absolutely. I have really been kind of obsessed about the AT. I've probably bought and read over 50 books about the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, God.
And, everything from A Walk in the Woods to books by Heather Anderson and Jennifer Parr Davis. Any book I could find at the library that I didn't have, I would read. National Geographic. You name it. And I've got quite an extensive book collection at this point in time.
But, that actually speaks to the fact, you want to read these books time and again. They're talking about the same trail, but literally every single person who does this has a different experience, don't they?
You are 100% correct on that. Nobody's hike is identical. And even if you're hiking with somebody, their experience is not going to be the same.
You're right. I did a bit of an experiment on this. I interviewed a guy a couple of years ago, and then I interviewed the person he hiked with last year. And even though they were together with each other 24/7, their experiences were entirely different. So I think that speaks to the way in which hike your own hike is so important when you're out there. And why was this the time that you could take a block of time to do the hikes? I know you're married with kids and so on. Was there a particular reason you were able to do it now?
Absolutely. There were two main reasons. The first being I retired from my job as a firefighter after 30 years with the city of Birmingham. I was a fire captain and an EMT, and I also had a pretty significant shoulder injury. I don't really have any cartilage left now on my right shoulder.
Oh.
And I had surgery to fix the problem. And so I basically got my shoulder fixed and burned out my sick time on the fire department and planned it so I should hopefully been able to start, which I did, the AT in April in the flip-flopper season.
Right. And as you say, you started in Harper's Ferry. Was that as part of the flip-flop kickoff? And how many people, because you said you want to avoid a bubble, but a lot of people go out at about the same time on the flip-flops as well, don't they? How many people set off around your time?
It was only about, I think, 15. Yeah, and so it wasn't much of a bubble. I saw some of them at the first shelter north of the is it Garvey? Yeah, the Garvey
shelter. Yeah.
And some of them I never saw again. I saw maybe 5 or 6 of them, and the rest of them they just vanished. I don't know what happened to them.
And you and your dog were by yourself to start. You didn't go with anybody else. Was
that is correct? Yeah.
Was that important to you? Did you particularly want to do a hike by yourself?
I was suffering from a bit of post-traumatic stress from my job. Being a firefighter is very, very stressful. And, I really couldn't find anybody who wanted to or was able to do a through hike at the time I wanted to do it. And for the last year prior, I worked with a trainer and my border collie. I thought, well, I can train her to be a service dog, which I can because I have had dogs for years,
Sure.
and I work with a licensed trainer. And I did get in Alabama you have to get a note from your doctor to state that it is a service dog or
Sure.
that kind of thing. So I did all of that, and she was good company. But what I came to find out for me that not all dogs are able to adapt to the trail well, and she adapted to the hiking portion, but because we had encountered a lot of dogs that were off leash. She was jumped several times. She became very, very, very assertive with other dogs.
Right.
Always had her under control, but
Good.
she was
By the way,
getting jumped.
good word for it. Good word for it. Assertive.
Assertive. Thank you. Yeah. And border collies, if you've ever been around border collies, they don't take anything off of anybody. They don't care if the dog is 100 pounds more than them. They have, there's a lot of fight in the dog, but there's not always a lot of size in a dog,
Yeah.
But, because what was happening with her, every time she was getting jumped, it was stressing me out more than anything else on the trail.
I'm sure.
And so I sent her home after about 6 weeks, went in June. And, I didn't have any more panic attacks. I had a few nightmares, but it was all, I could handle it.
So in retrospect then, do you regret taking your dog in the first place because you discovered 2 months into it that it wasn't for her?
Yeah, well, she enjoyed the hiking, but from a logistical standpoint, it was tough, Steve, because you have to carry extra stuff for your dog.
Sure.
So I'm carrying an extra 10 pounds. And it was super hot. And then, you're really hiking at your dog's level. And she was great when it was cool, but she also suffered from heat when we got to Pennsylvania. And, an emergency trip to the emergency vet is like, God, $700-800.
Oh my gosh.
Hadn't budgeted for that. So that took a huge hit. And then the tick issue, she and I both got nailed by the ticks, and we both had to go through the treatment. So, whatever your medical costs are going to be, you also have to factor in your budget for your dog too.
Sure. So when you were out there with the dog, though, did you enjoy that time with her? Or
absolutely.
Or were the panic attacks overshadowing that then?
Up until, I had that huge panic attack, which was probably about 5 weeks in, and then I had the next panic attack about four days later. It was actually going pretty well, except for the ticks, of course. And, they were awful. And then my friends in Pennsylvania were telling me, oh yeah, my dog had chronic this, and my husband died from this. And,
oh my gosh.
So the Lyme disease is just a huge issue especially if it's undiagnosed. So, I was not feeling well, and I had been nailed by 11 ticks. And so I went ahead and went through, there was like a treatment, dioxycycline, I think you go through, and you have to stay out of sun. So I lied and said, yeah, I'm staying out of the sun.
Yeah.
So I put on 100 sunscreen and wore a hat and long sleeves, and it was perfectly miserable, but I kept going.
I hadn't thought about that until you actually just said that. I've got the note, because I took my notes the other day when we spoke, that you pulled ticks off her. But of course, you took the dog into your tent with you. Yes. So you were taking the ticks into your tent with you as well,
Absolutely.
Weren't you?
I sure was.
Oh my God, I've not even thought about that.
Yeah, I know. And she had so many on her. And this is with her getting, flea babs and on the collar preventative and the front line. Yeah.
Wow.
And they would get on her and they'd be dying, but I think you still get exposed when they bite you.
Sure. Yeah. And you met a guy hiking out there called Shuckster, I believe it was. Shuckster, was it?
Chuckster, yeah, Chuckster.
Oh, Chuckster. Okay. I've written down Shuckster, so I heard Chuckster. And you eventually end up hiking 1,500 miles with him. And your dog was still with you initially for the first couple of weeks, I believe.
She was with us for about a week and a half.
Right.
And
Okay.
then my husband drove up to New York and picked her up and took her home. And Chuckster even joked, well, I can be your service dog now. He was so sweet.
So how did the dynamic of your hike change once you were in a mini tramley, because just the two of you are hiking together? Well,
right.
Did you notice differences?
Absolutely. And most of them were positive, because I remember there was one day where I was doing, the first long day I did was like 14 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd had a rough start, and then there was trail magic, and so, oh my God, I got to stop for this trail magic.
Of course.
And while I was there, a friend of mine who started the flip-flop from me was just driving down this random road in Massachusetts, and she recognized my shirt.
Yeah.
And she could, of course, you can see me a mile away. I was wearing one of those Jolly Gear Trail Magic shirts, and the neon orange and pink and yellow one that was real popular last year. So she stopped. So I ended up staying there for like 2 hours, and I did not get into our camp until after 9 o'clock. And Chuck was concerned about me, and he hiked like 2 miles to meet me, and even was willing to carry my backpack, back to the camp. And,
Nice.
It was just really nice having somebody that, if you weren't on schedule or something happened, they were concerned about you.
Yeah,
And,
I agree with that, and I understand that, but it's definitely a different thing. So, if you ever did this again, for example, would you go with a partner because you found that to be easier, or would you just let it, happen as it happens, as it were?
Yeah. Well, it is easier in some respects, but there's a trade-off. Sometimes it's just not always as easy. If most people I found are not going to hike exactly the same pace as you.
No.
They're either going to be faster or slower,
Sure.
or they're going to have to hike slower or hike a little bit faster to keep up with you. And, it's hard to say. When you did your hike, did you hike with your guy all the time, or did they all hike separate and meet up at camp?
Well, generally, I hiked with Trigger. I hiked with him for 1,700 miles, funny enough. And when I first met him and 2 other people, we just the others disappeared, and then there was just me and Trigger. So we pretty much were hiking within 50 yards of each other most of the time. And that probably because actually he was a faster hiker than me to start with. But, I upped my pace, not to keep up with him, but more I just improved my hiking. So did you hike with Chuckster because you had similar paces straight away, or did the two of you not compromise your hikes? Did the two of you change your hiking style to make sure you were around each other most of the time?
We did change our hiking style to some extent. I had an injury to my foot, and that was really slowing me down. So I was hoping that I could hike over 2 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I was actually hiking probably about 1.8 miles an hour.
Right.
And Chuck was probably a half a mile faster than that, which really doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of the day, they get ahead of you a couple miles.
Oh yeah.
So, and I, a couple of times I really pushed myself to keep up. I take longer strides. I would even jog because I used to run. And what ended up happening is I ended up giving myself a stress fracture by switching over to the running mode. I was wearing these Ultra Lone Peak shoes,
Right.
and I really needed something with a little more cushioning in it. And by the time I figured out that, I'd already damaged my foot. I thought it was tendonitis. I got it x-rayed at the ER, and they said, hey, it's tendonitis. I called my sports medicine doctor. We conferred. And I continued on with lots of ibuprofen. And
so hang on. How'd you do that? How'd you do that? It was wasn't it a broken?
It was
heel bone?
actually broken. And when I got to Lincoln, it was really hurting bad. And the doctor who I'd seen recommended that I take 2 weeks off and let the tendonitis clear up because that's what they thought it was.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who suffered from chronic tendonitis in her feet from hiking in New Hampshire said, hey, you want to go over to LaHoots here in Lincoln and see if they can fit you with a decent boot. And I conferred with a lot of thru hikers, some who had done it like 3 or 4 times, and they said, boots are really great for New Hampshire and Maine. You might not need it the rest of the trail, but this section is so rocky, it definitely couldn't hurt for you to try that. So invested in a pair of La Sportiva Predator 2 men's boots, size 9.5, and they were awesome.
How were they?
Much more rigid, and they really protected my heel, even though I didn't know it was broken. And if I had not switched to those boots, I wouldn't have been able to finish. There's just no way in the world. And between that and the ibuprofen, the pain was much more manageable. And
do you know what, Florence? That itself is trail magic. You met somebody who suggested something to you, and it worked out for you. The thing you needed, you got when you needed it. Happens. That is real trail magic to me.
It absolutely was. And this wonderful lady who worked for LaHoots, her nickname is Jay, and she is actually the manager of the shoe department at LaHoot Ski Shop. And and she was so awesome. I really got an unofficial sponsorship from LaHoot's because she sent me 3 packages while I was on the trail.
Wow.
And they were amazing. I would get stickers, I would get chocolate, I would get Darn Tough hiking socks.
Nice.
And oh my gosh, she was so amazing. And I would send her postcards and stuff along the way. And she's just an absolutely amazing person. And she has seen, in the course of, she's worked for that company for over 20 years. She's probably seen thousands of through hikers come through.
Sure.
And I was amazed that she followed me. She said I was the first one she ever followed. So we had
Good Lord.
so we had a really great connection. She's an awesome lady. She also has a dog that she hikes with, and she also skis, which I really know nothing about except that I'm very terrible at that. And we're lifelong friends now.
It's amazing how that happens. I want to go back to the beginning again, though, for a second.
Sure.
Starting at Harper's, you get exposed pretty soon to the rocks of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yes.
And had you broken your heel by then, or was it later?
Not yet.
Right, okay.
But I did chip my hand right before Port Clinton. I was going through this horrible rock garden, and I fell 2 days in a row where I fell forward, and I basically punched my hand on a rock.
Oh, gosh.
And the second time I did that, I also cut my knee wide open, and I was bleeding all over the place. And then my right hand had swelled up to the point that I couldn't grip a trekking pole. I was only about a mile away from the next trailhead, and I was able to call a shuttle service, and they took me straight to the Dock in the Box I think it's the town of Bethel. It's the one that's like right next to Port Clinton.
Right.
And I was the first through hiker they had seen that year. And so they were kind of excited about that.
Yeah.
And so they actually ended up glued the skin on my knee back together for me, and they x-rayed my right hand, and I'd actually chipped it. So that was technically my first broken bone. And I didn't know what to do. So I called around, and I found this hostel, the Lookout, which is run by Yard Sale.
Uh-huh.
And I came out of the ER, and I've got like my arm in a sling, my knees all bandaged up, and I'm like, God, what am I going to do? Because I'm like I'm about 30 miles away from where I got off the trail. So I walk outside, and I had one, but not 2 people who saw me and figured out, hey, she's a through hiker. Hey, do you need a ride anywhere? I couldn't believe it. I was just there to get lunch and a coffee.
It's a look we have, it's a
desperation.
It's a forlorn, lost look. We all have it.
Desperation and all bandaged up,
Yeah.
And plus I still had JoJo with me at the time too, so they like dogs, or they wouldn't have asked. And so this one couple took me to the Lookout.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up staying there convalescing for 3 days, and It was over Memorial Day weekend, and had a wonderful time. And as soon as I could use my right hand again, I got shuttled 60 miles south back to where I broke myself, and I hiked back that way. Cool. And I met Chuckster in that region, just north of Port Clinton at the first shelter.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
And then I had another friend of mine that wanted to come in and do trail magic. Her name's Outlaw. She's from New Jersey, and she has through hiked the AT twice, and she has a wonderful garden. She said, hey, how about I bring y'all some trail magic and make you some homemade tomato sauce? And so I said, heck yeah.
That's why Chuckster wanted to stay with you.
Yes,
for your
that's how he
cooking.
joined up. I was bragging about, hey, my friend is going to be doing this wonderful trail magic at the Lookout. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So he and I met up with her, and she picked us up from the next shelter and took us there. And so we did like 2 or 3 days slack packing out of the Lookout. It was great. And that's how Chuckster and I started hiking.
Yeah, and you'd established yourself as a team then, of course. But also 2023 was a time of huge weather events on the AT, especially in the north. How was it for you?
Oh, my God. I got beat up.
Not good then.
I got beat up. There's no other way to describe it. So when we hit Mount Cube was probably one of my worst days.
All right.
And right before the Hexacube shelter, there's this ledge. And it was funny because Chuck fell off of it too, but I fell off of it worse. So I was on top of it, and it's really almost like marble. And I just started sliding forward, and I couldn't stop. And when I hit, I landed with my knee up underneath me, and I thought I broke my kneecap, and I totally pulled all the muscles in my knee. And I'm just like, oh my God, this sucks. And then I get to the top of Mount Cube, and I had already talked to the folks at the hikers welcome. Was it? Yeah, it was a hikers welcome hostel, and
that's just before. Is it Moosalek? Moosalek, isn't it?
Yes.
The Clean Clip one,
yeah. So, and I told them I was coming. Said, okay, we'll be down there for you in about an hour. I said, no. I said, I have fallen 4 times this day, and I broke a trekking pole. It's probably going to be 2 to 2.5 hours before I make it down there.
I bet.
And I ran into 3 other hikers through that section, and they forgot to call. They were all planning to stay there, and the only place you can get phone service is from top of Mount Cube. So I had already made the phone call, and I said, they will take all of y'all. It won't be a problem. They are definitely coming for me, so don't worry about that. And sure enough, I got probably about 1.5 miles away from the trailhead, and Legion, who worked there, had hiked up the trail and grabbed my pack from me. And I'd also like to say there was another couple that were hiking with me, and they had taken a lot of my extra weight because when my next fall, I really messed up my shoulder, the one I had shoulder surgery on when I broke my trekking pole. And so they were carrying probably maybe 1/3 of the weight of my pack, and then Legion took the rest of my pack, and I just kind of limped on out of there. And I did take a 0 the next day.
That's
but I got
really, really nice of them. But
it was really nice of them.
You know what I'm thinking though? You've just told me about your shoulder, about your knees falling over, your broken heel. Did your husband have anything to say about any of this? Not that he's in charge of you. I'm just saying that, people, when they hear injuries, when they're at home and they don't know what you're doing out there, really, they know you're out there, they know you're hiking, so on. Do they have an opinion on that?
They usually do. And so what I found was best for me after I posted just a couple of bruises and people's every overreaction to my bruises, I'm just like, I'm not going to show where my knee got glued up. I did show where my hand got chipped and it swelled up really bad, but I just really didn't want that kind of attention.
Yeah,
and,
it ain't for sissies, is it? It's not an easy thing, is it?
No.
This 80 hike, you're going to get smashed up all the way through at some stage, aren't you?
You absolutely are, and I saw people who I thought were much better, faster hikers than me. Because the northbounders were catching us in New Hampshire for sure, a huge bubble, and I saw some of them that were trying to go the same pace that they were going further south, and they were getting smashed too. It was kind of like it's an equalizer. Even if you're a great hiker, friction and gravity rule.
Yeah. So tell us then, you made it to Katahdin. When did you actually get there, by the way, in Katahdin?
I actually summited Katahdin on September the 12th.
Okay. Summited September the 12th, and it's a great day anyway. Whether it's at the end of your trail or not, it's still a great day to go up Katahdin, isn't it?
It was wonderful to get up there and to summit. It was a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I took my time. Like I said, I was pretty beaten up. So, and it's pretty technical getting up to Katahdin, especially there's that one spot where the rebar is.
Yes.
And that's a lot of fun, but it's worse coming down than going up it.
Definitely.
And when we were coming down, Chuckster and I encountered a couple who were doing a lot of, they were just hitting the peaks, and she had a total freak out there. And her husband was trying to talk her down, and he just wasn't having any luck. And she was trying to do it face forward, but you can't do it that way because you can't hook your foot in.
That's right.
And so I came up to her, and I've done some rope rescue and stuff on the fire department, and I just talked to her, and I said, hey, you can do this. I said, why don't you, if you turn the other way and grab the bar, and your husband tell you where to put your foot on the next spot, I think that would work really, really well for you. And she did. She calmed down and she did it. And she was so relieved. And then she asked me, are you a police officer or a firefighter or something? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, I'm a retired firefighter. She said, I could tell.
But you know what, though? You were her trail magic that day. It just happens all the time, and everybody knows that, I'm sure. When they've been on the trail, something happens when you need it, and you were her trail magic. So Katahdin was done. and you headed south.
Yes.
But you didn't eventually flip back to Harper's Ferry. You went back to Roanoke because that was where Chuckster had started. This is actually a good example of how you need to be prepared to compromise when you're hiking with a partner. How did it feel to miss out that part of the hike, which, by the way, you finished this year? Did it sit well with you at the time?
At the time, it didn't, but then when Chuckster said, "Hey, Flo, can you figure up our itinerary? You know what we do each day?" Because I'm pretty good at logistics planning, so I did, and when I figured it up, I realized that there just really wasn't enough time to get in that 300-mile section for me and be done by December the 5th, which is when my husband and I had a trip planned, because it never occurred to me it would take me that long to do the AT. So
takes as long as it takes, though. It
really does. Yeah. And I gave it 110%. I'm telling you, Steve, it took every bit.
And then you told me that you pretty much platinum blazed the southern section from Roanoke.
I did, yeah.
Did you enjoy that, or did you feel that you'd lost something from the hike? Or was it a case then of having done the Katahdin, you then wanted to just not so much get that bit out of the way, but I think you know what I mean. Doing it comfortably may feel different. Are you happy with that choice to just pretty much platinum blaze to the end?
I am, except, of course it's expensive to do that.
Of course, yeah.
That's the downside of it. Fortunately I'm retired and I've got a pension coming in. So, yeah. But if I had been sticking to a budget, there's no way I could have done that. And I figured up where all the hostels were and which ones were open that time of year, because a lot of them, there's just no hostels open in November.
Sure.
And most of them were closed. And Chuckster had gone back and gotten his car. So what we were actually doing too is I would drop him off. I would go to the other end of our trail and leave his car, and I would hike to where he dropped me off, and then he would pick me up, and then we'd go hit the hostel or the hotel.
Right.
Which is I never felt hungry again, because we would go out for dinner. We could wouldn't have to pay for expensive shuttles.
Yeah.
He drove a Honda Insight. Only takes 6 gallons of gas to fill it up.
Nice. So you still had that thing where you could eat like a condemned man or condemned woman. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. I've just had it recently in the UK. So when did you reach Springer around Thanksgiving, I believe it was?
Yeah, we summited Springer on, I'll have to look, I want to say it was November the 26th or 27th.
Right. Okay.
I can't remember exactly. I've got it written down somewhere. So I finished up right after Thanksgiving, and I had, you may have heard of him, Nimbawill Nomad, as a friend of mine.
Of course.
And,
oh, really?
Yeah, and he was spending some time up there at one of the hostels. He's friends with them. Right. And so he met me at my finish, and I was so excited about that.
That is awesome.
And my husband got up there too, and I was so happy to see my husband. He's got really bad knees and a hip, so he can't hike for more than 2 miles before it.
Right, bless him.
He has issues. But you were asking earlier, I didn't answer that question, how my husband felt about my injuries. And I'll be honest with you, I pretty much kept most of my injuries close to my chest, and I did not tell him how bad I was beaten up unless I went to the hospital or something.
Oh, dear.
So, I tended to kind of think the best of it. I said, okay, they say it's a tendinitis. My hiking friends who are experts say, yeah, you can hike with tendinitis, Flo. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep hiking with tendinitis.
Good to
go. So I did.
So you still had the broken foot. Did you waver at all about coming back to fill in the Harpers to Roanoke section? Because it's a 300-mile section and your foot wasn't quite right, was it? I mean,
it was mend?
Did it mend?
It did mend, and as soon as I got back, before we went on our trip, I went to get my foot x-rayed, and she said, it doesn't look broken, but based on how much pain you have and the fact that it hasn't gone away after 2 weeks of rest, we need to schedule an MRI. So she did an MRI on me in mid-December, and it came back as very, very cracked. She said it looked like I had been through a war zone with all the cracks in it, where they had healed and tried to, where it had tried to heal, and I had re-cracked it again. And she was like, "You got to go in the boot and go non-weight bearing." And I'm like, "Yes, doctor," and I did.
Wow.
So I put on the boot, and it healed up really well. And I was in the boot from middle of December till middle of February.
Wow.
So that only gave me 1 month to get back in condition that I could continue my hike and try to get that last 300 miles done.
And were you ready? Were you ready when you started?
I was as ready as I could get.
You were as ready as you told your husband.
I was ready as I could get. And I was shocked. It was actually much easier doing it even after the broken foot than it was any month that I did last year on the trail.
Wow.
Because my foot wasn't hurting and my whole body wasn't hurting. Even though I had been off the trail for about 3 months, my body was, I guess, still conditioned enough from the through hike that I wasn't having the hip and the knee pain. And, when you go to sleep tonight and you're just hurting so bad and it's so hard to fall asleep, it never was like that. And it was pain-free, relatively, as pain-free as you can get.
Of course, yeah. It's a pretty joyous thing to be able to finish up, without too much pain. So coming into Harper's, did that feel special to you?
It absolutely did. I spent my last night on the trail at the Blackburn, I think it's called AT Center.
Right.
And a friend of mine, Roll Tide is his trail name, was there.
Christopher Marshman.
Yes.
Yes, great guy.
And he's a wonderful guy, and it was so awesome to see him. And of course, you get your customary trail magic and picture with him. And it was just so wonderful to see him and enjoy that part. And then that last 12 miles into Harper's Ferry was just so joyous, and it's got a slight downhill to it. So I felt like I was flying.
I bet you did.
And then a friend of mine, Lori, who's retired from the ATC.
Lori Potiger.
Yes.
By the way, both Chris and Lori Potiger have been on the show as well.
Oh, they're awesome. And they met me when I got to the ATC, and they took me out to the Harper's Ferry Brewery Company for a celebration. And a lady that I had met on the trail the day before, she brought her whole family. So we had 10 people there. It was amazing. And Lori gave me the thing of bath salts, because I told her that I love to just soak in the tub. That was the one thing I missed on the trail, was not being able to do a great tub soak every night.
So is that now an itch that you've scratched, or do you think you'll be heading out for other long hikes in the future?
I absolutely will be heading out for other long hikes in the future.
Despite the fact that you've been lying to your husband about how bad you were. Is that right?
Yeah, I just I've got a high pain tolerance. I think that's kind of a requirement if you're a thru hiker.
You're right, yeah.
And and sometimes when things are injured, you're like, okay, well, let's just wait and see if it gets any better. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it stays about the same.
Sure.
And you just got to decide, do I need to take off for this, or can I keep going? And I've always tried to keep going as best I can,
Yeah. You firefighters are made of such different stuff than the rest of us. So, bless you for doing that, because you may have found it tougher, if you were just a weedy old person like me who was in insurance all his life.
But I found something really interesting. If you're older and maybe haven't had a very athletic background, you can still totally be a champ on the AT.
Oh, totally.
And the reason why is that a lot of us other folks that have done sports and have been firefighters or have played football or basketball or whatever sport, you get really, really tore up playing those sports. You have joint injuries, you have cartilage injuries. Whereas if you kind of played it safe your whole life and then the AT was like the first time, you still got great joints. And unless you screw them up while you're hiking. So, I've seen some people who are my age and older just do awesome on the AT.
Absolutely. By the way, I'd like to point out I never played safe in all my life. So, but now,
well, me either, for sure. Being 30 years a firefighter, And I have, I guess, a different level of what's scary to me. And,
I'm
that
sure.
really funny thing that's been going around, what are you scared of most, the bear or the man? What would you choose? And I'm like, heck, I would choose the bear every time because they always run from me. If I say, hey, bear, they're like, psh, they take off.
Absolutely.
So with men, most of the time I've had very positive experiences on the whole AT. I have to say, you meet a few people that are kind of questionable, but you don't have to hike with them.
That's right. You absolutely don't. I always think that most people bring the best version of themselves to a trail, or it brings out the best version of themselves, which is why the place is such a magical place to be part of.
It really is. It was just a wonderful experience. I met some amazing people. And I think you should hike the way you want to and
Absolutely.
the way you can afford to do so. And you can always change it up. If you're having a really bad day on the trail, it's okay to stay at a hostel, get all your laundry done, and then take a zero or even slack pack back to the hostel.
Sure.
This time of year, it's so freaking hot and it's so easy to get chronically dehydrated. And if you're an older person, that can definitely lead to cardio issues, and it can also lead to strokes. So, if you're over the age of 50, you really need to, watch your electrolyte consumption.
Sure.
And if you're feeling super weak, take a rest day. I mean, the trail is always going to be there. And if you're not feeling well and you need to recover, listen to your body and recover. That's my best advice.
That's great advice, I tell you. You know what you're talking about. You've done the hike, and you've been a firefighter, so I'm sure a lot of that played into how you manage your hike as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Look, if you do go again on another hike, I mean, I'd love to talk to you again on that. Have you got any lined up at all?
Well, I've got a couple of ideas. I've section hiked the Pinnahote Trail,
right,
and I haven't done the Georgia section, and I'm thinking about doing that, and then maybe doing the Benton MacKay section to the AT. I'm also thinking about doing the Florida Trail because it's not really that far from me.
Sure.
And and I'd love to do probably the next. If I was going to finish the Triple Crown, I would do the probably the Pacific Crest Trail next.
Right. Well, if you ever do can't do the Florida Trail, and when you get somewhere near to me, you can come and stay the night at ours. You'd be welcome to drive in and out of ours a couple of nights, so we come pick you up. So it'd be kind of cool.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I will definitely check that out. Yeah, and I'm thinking about next year probably doing some sections of the Florida Trail. I don't know if I would. It would be nice to through hike it. What's the total mileage on it? It's
about 1,100 miles. About 1,100 miles.
1,100. Okay. Well, that's not too horrible.
Yeah.
Except in the summer.
This is a ridiculous thing to say, isn't it? 1,100 miles is not too horrible. I mean, it's a long ride.
It's not too horrible.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I admire the way you did this. And if you do, I say, reach out if you're going to do any other hikes, and we'll talk again. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve.
Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
She's one tough lady, isn't she? Plenty of injuries, including a broken foot, but she kept on grinding and getting there, underplaying the extent of all those injuries. And a big shout out, of course, to Jay at La Hoops Ski Shop. Seems like she adopted Fireflo and made her own trail magic for her. That's sometimes all that we need, support when you're at a low ebb. She certainly knows a bunch of trail celebs as well. Nimble Nomad, Roll Tide and Laurie Podiger. All good people cheering her on. I'm sure we're going to hear more from Fireflo again in the future. Now, our class of 24 with Michael Gaasch first up. Remember, I lost our first recording in case you don't understand what we're talking about in the beginning. Here's Michael.
Hey, Mighty Blue.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, I'm really sorry you lost your entire show because I saw that. I mean, you're like clockwork, and it didn't come out today. I'm like, oh, man, you must have lost everything.
No, tomorrow's Wednesday. Tomorrow's Thursday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just a day early.
I know it happens. It happens when you're on the trail. You lose touch.
Yep.
So we're gonna go straight into it, Michael. Let's introduce you because people haven't actually met you yet. They thought they have if they would listen to my recording, but as you say, I've lost the recording. So why are you out there?
It's something I've been wanting to do since I was in high school when I was a junior, since 74. So It's been 50 years and life got in the way. And, I had a family to support. So now that I'm retired, they are supporting me 100%.
And have they known this was something you're always going to do eventually? Yes,
they have. My whole family, my mom, who's recently passed, has known it. My wife and her family. Yeah, it's something, like I said, it's something that I've always wanted to do. And I've always gone out and hiked portions of the trail, but I've never been able to do the entire thing. So now that I'm retired, I can do it.
Have you been doing sections then?
I have. I've done sections like I did about 27 years ago. I did from the Amacola Falls up to Springer Mountain. And this time when I did it, I said, boy, it's sure a whole lot easier 27 years ago. I've been to Katahdin before with my two oldest kids when they were in 97. I took them up there. Right. And then my youngest son, we hiked the Delaware Water Gap probably about 8 years ago. So, yeah, I've been doing sections.
So you've been on it and you've been on the trail. When did you actually start, Michael?
We started February 1st. And
wow.
It was kind of cold, but, on the 5th, I was wearing short sleeves. But then the weather changed. It got cold again.
Yeah. I mean, I started February 26th, second time, and it was distinctly colder than it was when I started before. And I started in March before. So you're out there, and you're coming up to we're actually recording on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. They say you've got to be at Harper's Ferry before July the 4th if you're going to get to Katahdin in time. How do you feel it's going so far?
Well, I'm actually in Port Clinton.
Okay.
So we have about 75 miles left of Rocksylvania. And you know what? I think Rocksylvania it's everybody talks about how bad the rocks are. Maybe it's going to start here at Port Clinton, because I mean it's been tough, but it's not what I expected. I expected free fields from morning to night, and it hasn't been like that.
Oh, you make me crack up. I tell you, thinking about it. Yeah. It's one of those things that, we all experience it differently. And you're in Port Clinton, and I know that we've mentioned this on the show before. That downhill from into Port Clinton is quite an eye-opener, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. It's gravel. It's super, super steep. And one of the other hikers that I met said, you know what? They make a lot of money if they just made a giant slide.
That's right. With a pool at the bottom. That'd be pretty cool to do. Yeah. So you've got a trail name. What is your trail name?
My trail name is No Rush the Elder. And the reason it's the Elder is when I was in the Smokies, there was a young lady that I met, and she was also No Rush.
All right.
And we're like trying to think of a way to differentiate between us. So since she was 24 and I'm 66, I became No Rush the Elder, and she became No Rush the Younger.
There we are. Have you seen her again, or has she rushed past you?
Oh, she's a great hiker. I think she's up in Massachusetts.
So what number are you at now then? How many miles is that at Port Clinton?
I know it's more than 1,200. I want to say 1,220.
Okay.
1,225, somewhere around there.
Well, you're certainly getting there. And I asked you for some notes, as you know, and you sent me those notes as you were staying in Duncannon, and you said you're going to be getting ready to start with the rocks this morning. This was a few days ago. So, right. And you now think that the rocks haven't been that bad. They do get worse as it goes on, but, if you're enjoying it, that's fine. And frankly, while we have a bit of fun, I guess, about Pennsylvania, really, it's part of the trail. And it's a fantastic part of the trail, like every other part is a great part of the trail. It's just another thing you have to manage, and you're managing it as you go along.
I agree.
And the various topics you wanted to talk about, you said, things you've learned from Mighty Blue. So, tell us about that then.
Things I've learned, like you talk about how much weight you lost, and you were eating peanut butter a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually eat peanut butter at least twice a day. So at lunch, I have like a tortilla with peanut butter and gummy worms in it for lunch. I have 2 of those. And then in my ramen bomb, I also put peanut butter in it, and a lot of peanut butter out there.
Hang on, Michael. Was that peanut butter and gummy bears?
Gummy worm.
Gummy worm. Oh, even better.
Yes. It's like jelly that won't go bad.
Oh, it's a winning combination then.
It is. And I share it with everybody on the trail that I meet.
So what else did you learn from me, from Mighty Blue?
So the other thing I learned is, take your time, enjoy the sights. You and RTK, take your time and enjoy. You may never go this way again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, see the sights. If there's a viewpoint, go look. If there's something to do in a town, go do it. And you don't have to go out there and stay for 30 days in a row camping and just go into town and get your food and leave. Take your time.
Yeah, the whole thing's an experience. Actually, one of the things you said in your list of things you learned from me was falls. I presume you've had a couple of falls, have you?
Yeah, I have. So I was starting to count them because I think you said you had like 49 falls.
46 first time, 43 second time. So I improved second time.
So there are times that it's like when I was coming out of one of the waysides, I realized we'd been there too long. So I was hiking kind of fast and I fell flat on my chest and I got up and didn't get hurt and started hiking again real fast. Within 10 minutes, I fell again. So I quit counting because I probably would have surpassed you. And I haven't really gotten hurt until yesterday. Ooh. We did our longest miles yesterday from, I'm trying to think of the shelter. Well, it was along the ridge that goes from Lickdale to Port Clinton. And like I said, we did 19.4 and we had taken a break and I got up and I stumbled forward and I fell back and I landed on a rock and broke a rib.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I can feel the indentation and I'm a retired nurse and I palpated it and I can breathe okay. It's just sore, so I take ibuprofen about every 6 hours.
Right. That's not going to slow you, well, not slow you down, but that's not going to stop your height then? No, okay, well, good for you.
Nope.
And you also mentioned the people on the trail, and of course we all think of the people on the trail. Has it surprised you? Now, because us older guys, I feel that we feel the need to fit in more with the younger guys because there are more younger people there. How are you relating, particularly with younger people on the trail?
Most of them, if you start talking to them, they're very receptive, and they're very, because they find out our age, they're really in awe that we're out here hiking it. And I have to remind myself that, when they say that they're doing 20 and 30 miles a day, they're half my age. So I have to go, what I'm doing a good job. The trail angels are tremendous though. I mean, they leave water out there for us, ice cold water. Like one day I was hiking and it was super, super hot. It was one of the hot days. And there was a maintenance guy working on one of the shelters. And he stopped us and he said, "Hey, you want a cold beer?" And I went, "Really? Sure." It was the bomb.
Oh, I bet it was, yeah. And I know you do. I know you've got a YouTube channel because I see some of your posts on Facebook. What was the impetus behind that, or was this just for home of your, or how's that worked out doing that? Because it's quite a commitment. Having just failed to do a podcast on my UK hike, I feel for you. There's a certain amount of time you have to give up to do these things, don't you? So how's that gone?
So I don't really do it myself. What I do is I take all the pictures and I do all the videos and I send them to my wife back in South Carolina, and she does them all, and she's really, really good at it. In fact, like when I was in Franklin, her parents and her and my niece actually drove to Franklin just to take me to breakfast.
It's so cool. It's so nice, yeah. So you've been thinking about this for a long time, 50 years. How has and I'm sure, and I know you're enjoying it because I've seen you for some of your videos. You're having a good time out there. You just said you're enjoying the people, you're enjoying the whole thing of being out there, the whole experience. How has it compared to what you imagined it would be? Because what you've done in the past, you've been on the AT before, you've touched the AT, you've even been to Katahdin. It's not the same as living out there, is it? No, it is not. I mean, in some ways it's far exceeded. In some ways, like I said, the way that I was surprised. It's a lot harder than people think. Everybody sees all the great stuff on YouTube. No, it's hard. But the pictures that you take and the video you take do not do it justice. It's beautiful out here. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of know it is. And the beauty is, to me, the beauty was the moments. It wasn't always the same thing, but it was just the moments you share with people, the views you have. And I think one, two people, the year I went anyway, were putting on Facebook, don't take pictures of the views, take pictures of people with the views. Right. And, I think that's kind of an important thing to remember. It's the combination of the people and the beauty on the trail. Well, look, right. Nice to meet you for our listeners. And, we'll catch up with you every couple of weeks. And I just wish you will keep going and keep getting those videos out, okay?
Okay, I sure will.
Okay, man. Take it easy, okay?
Can I say one thing that's not on the podcast?
Of course you can. You absolutely can.
Do me a favor. Next time you talk to RTK, tell him how much he's appreciated. I don't think he understands how much that book that he wrote did for people to go, hey, platinum blazing is whatever you make it, and that way you'll enjoy your journey. So, yeah, if you could afford it, do it.
Yeah, damn right. Oh, no question. So, in fact, he definitely coined a phrase. Platinum blazing is his phrase. So kudos to him. And you're right. And I think it makes the whole trail more accessible than it would otherwise have been. So I certainly think kudos to Bruce for that. Anyway, buddy, you take it easy and we'll catch up soon, okay?
Thank you. You have a great day.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
1,200 miles in, starting on February the 1st, didn't appear to faze him. I've been following along on his YouTube, so I'll include that link in the show notes. Before we meet Moxie, I want to thank those of you who continue to support my efforts here at the Hiking Radio Network. This week, our monthly donors are Brian Helton Jr., Lisa Rana, Woody Bass, Natisha Webb and Jeffrey Breeden. I'm so grateful for you all, and I know I tell you all the time, but I mean it every single time I say it. And if you haven't supported us in the past, maybe you'd like to help us out with a few bucks to keep the show going as a gesture of your support. You just need to go to hikingradionetwork.com and click on one of the many donate buttons that you're going to find there. If you think you get value from the podcast, I hope you'll consider sending us some value in return. Cheers. Now, our second new class of 24 member this week is Anita Gschwendtner, or Moxie. Here she is. So we're on now with Anita. I'm going to try this last name. It's Anita Gschwendtner. Is that right?
Gschwendtner. Yep, Gschwendtner.
Not too bad then. Otherwise known as Moxie. And first, we've not even spoken at all. So, hi, how are you?
I am good, Steve. I am good. I'm talking to you from Unionville, New York, right now.
I remember it well. Are you staying in the park? There's a little park there they used to allow people staying. Oh, right. Okay, cool.
Yep. I have a package coming tomorrow, so.
Right. So what's your story then? So let's come back to why you're doing this. Why are you doing this in the first place?
I guess I love backpacking first off and hiking, and I just was up for a new challenge and something kind of long distance. So yeah, and I haven't spent much time on the East Coast, so I thought it'd be a great
it's a bit more than
time to do it.
It's a bit more than kind of long distance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So,
for sure.
So
it's been awesome.
And when did you start?
I started April 15th at the Approach Trail.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. You are moving then, aren't you? So give me some background about yourself. What's your story? Did you have to leave work, or were you retired, or what?
No, so I do seasonal work, and right now I work at a ski resort in northern Michigan.
Nice.
So I kind of saved money there for 2 years, and then, saved up enough that I could take the summer off, and I'll go back there in the winter and work again. I do serving. All
right. So you're going to save enough money next time to go somewhere else long distance, are you?
Yeah, I kind of had the PCT on my list.
Oh, there you go. So, what has it been about the trail so far? You're now into New York. Actually, I think you're still in New Jersey officially, even though Unionville's in New York. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So we'll be back in New Jersey tomorrow. We kind of go in and out. So,
Sure, yeah. So, how's it been like? Tell me about how it's gone.
It's actually been great. I mean, I've been really lucky. I haven't had any injuries, not really any blisters.
Wow.
Wow. I've been feeling really good. Honestly, it's been good. I can't complain.
And wanting to do this, this has been, obviously you say you've been saving for a couple of years, and this is not a cheap thing to do, is it? How are you finding the cost of it? Is it working out okay for you?
Yeah, actually, because first off, like when I started in Georgia, I went all the way to Damascus. I did not stop at any hostels, so I spent
Good
no
Lord.
money.
Wow.
I didn't even take a zero until I got to Damascus for trail days, and
Wow.
I only stayed in a hotel twice, so they were kind of like not really Nero's, but
Huh?
yeah. So I mean, that was pretty cheap, not having to stop too much. So
Yeah, but I always used to find whenever I go into town, you just hemorrhage money. You spend money hand over fist, don't you?
yeah, I've been pretty good about that, though. I mean, I do eat, make sure I'm getting my calories because I probably don't eat as much as I should on trail, but
Sure.
I don't go too crazy.
But you know what, though? It's almost impossible to eat as much as you should do on trail, isn't it? Because you're burning so many calories. Have you, and women don't tend to lose as much weight as men. Have you lost much weight at all?
I've probably lost 5 to 7 pounds. Not too much.
Oh, fine. So tell us about your background. What you work in Colorado, you say?
No, northern Michigan.
Sorry, Michigan, rather. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your background? Your family? What do your family think about you doing this?
My family, my kids, they totally support me. I'm a widower, so I was widowed very, very young and had to raise the 3 kids on my own. And they 100% support me. They cheer me on every day, so they're like my hugest supporters. Their biggest supporters.
Bet they are.
Yeah, so they say Mom's a badass.
Yeah, there's the worst things of being called a badass when you're a little bit older. It makes you feel pretty good about things, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So how's the hike unfolded for you? You've met people out on the trail that you spend some time with? You in a tramley?
Yeah, so I started out not really with anybody. I mean, I met people along the way and everything, of course, and then a lot of people had gotten off trail or they got behind me. But I'm with a couple people now. They're in their 30s, and
Right.
Jeff, he's from Montana, and Gazelle, she's from Germany, and we hooked up in Damascus, and we've been hiking since Damascus together.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
That's
been
quite
good.
some time. Yeah. And are you tenting or hammocking? What's your setup?
Yep. So I'm tenting. I have an X Mid 2 Durston.
Oh, right.
Non-pro. I kind of like the double wall myself, but
okay. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I've been super happy with it.
So, have you had any adventures that perhaps you might want to share with us?
Wow. I mean, the whole trail's been an adventure. I did the Virginia Triple Crown all in one go, so that was pretty exciting and such a beautiful day. Yeah, that was a long day, but it was beautiful.
How many miles was it from if you're going from the you must have hit Dragon's Tooth first, obviously. So you did the other two as well in the same day?
Yep. So I camped before Dragon's Tooth, and then I camped after Tinker Cliffs down below. So it was about 24 some miles.
Oh dear! I took 4 days to do that this year. I took 4 days to do that.
Yeah, but you probably got like a sunset or a sunrise or something at Magazine, right?
We did. We actually got a sunset. You're right. We got a sunrise rather, which was pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And
so I missed out on that.
And so you're now in Unionville. So you've obviously been through Pennsylvania. How did you find that?
Oh boy, the rocks, man. And I guess the worst thing for me actually in Pennsylvania was the long water carries. When you get up north, like for instance, going out of I'm drawing a blank.
Port Clinton.
I can't think.
Is Port Clinton, Pennsylvania? I never remember where's where, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was. Gosh, I'm trying to think of now in my blank. It was just like a whole mile rock scramble coming up,
right.
And it was so hot. You had to get water at the shelter before because there was no water for 13 miles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was a really tough day, and it's all out in the open.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a rough one. But the water carry, I think, is the hardest for me when it's that many miles.
Sure. And what about the we've had so many heat advisories recently. How bad has it been up the top of the mountains?
It's been pretty bad. It's not as bad when you're in tree cover. But yeah, I mean, it's been really kind of brutal, actually. I try to get up a little bit earlier and hike when it's cooler. So some mornings I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and head out at 4.
Oh, God.
When it's going to be really hot.
Will you do that with your team, do you?
No, I go by myself.
All right.
They're
cool.
younger, so yeah. They're younger, so they don't mind the heat as bad as I do, but the heat in my older age, it kind of kills me.
Imagine what it's like for me. I'm 72 this year.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I would never have guessed that.
There you go. So you're in, as you say, Unionville. I'm trying to think where's next. You get into New York, and then you go to the creamery, the ice cream shop, which is awesome. You've got to make sure you do that. I'm just trying to think my way through New York. Oh, there's also the monastery as well. So you've got quite some nice things going up. And of course, you've got the delis of New York, which is the best way to eat all day long in delis. So you're going to love that.
I'm excited about that. We're actually heading to the drive-in tomorrow we're like 17 miles from the Warwick drive-in. So we're going to camp there tomorrow night. So that's exciting.
That wasn't open, I don't believe, on my 2 through hikes. I went in 2014 and 2019, and I don't remember that being there. And I just wish so many people have been to it since that, and they've told me about it on the show. It's one of the things I'd almost like to do the trail again, so I could go to the drive-in. It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So we're going to catch up with you again in a couple of weeks, and I hope you continue to enjoy the hike. And we'll catch up, I don't know, probably about 10 days' time, okay?
Okay, sounds great, Steve. Thanks so much.
All right. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
She's certainly not hanging about, is she? Didn't start until the middle of April, and she's already in Unionville. But then not staying off trail that much will keep her moving forward. And she shows that even with a tight budget, this hike can be done. And I mean, how about no zeros till Damascus? That must be tough, but she must be tough as well. Doing the Virginia Triple Crown in a single day? Blimey. As I say, I think I took 4 days to do it this year. Now, I was originally introduced to David Vose as Quixote, but as you're about to hear, Quixote is no more. Please welcome Professor Milkshake. So we've got another member of our Mighty Blue class of 24, and I've actually just met him because I said hi originally. This is David Vose with the fantastic trail name, which I'm going to ask him about in a minute, of Professor Milkshake. Hey, David, how are you?
Good, thanks. I'm great, Steve. Nice to talk to you.
Well, I've got to ask you, of course, because I know you were actually Quixote, which is a great name as well, but why did you drop that to become Professor Milkshake?
I really like the name Quixote, and I wanted to, honor the tradition of the trail by keeping a name like that, but it just got to be a name that people kind of many people didn't actually know who Don Quixote was. That was kind of the origin of it.
All right. That's kind of sad.
Yeah. But I'm kind of tall, gray, thin on a quest, and it kind of fit.
Yeah.
But people had a hard time remembering it, and they didn't know the reference. And then I started hiking with another great group of people, some young folks, and they were trying to guess my profession, and they noted that I tended to have lots of milkshakes when I went into town. So they came up with Professor Milkshake, and it's a name that people hear and they smile and they remember it. So I decided that I would change.
That's very cool. Now I know you're out here for a purpose. You're on a 6-month sabbatical, and you're one of the directors of the Binghamton University Library. You're doing something specific, aren't you, about the trail?
Yeah. So I'm a senior director at Binghamton. I have oversight for some of the collections and the research services and instruction services. And I'm on a 6-month sabbatical. And so when you're on a sabbatical, you do a research project. And so what I'm doing is kind of looking at the history, the evolution of what I would call the grassroots trail guides, the trail guides that were created and have been published for through hikers.
Sure.
So, the AMC has had their guides for years, but back in the 90s, they started there was I think the first one was called The Philosopher's Guide, actually.
All right.
And that was published for a number of years by through hikers. It was kind of, the information in it was sourced by through hikers. And that kind of stopped publication, and it went into the AT handbook. And then that ran for a while, and now it's the AWOL guide.
Yeah.
And that's very popular.
And then, of course, Far Out. Then Far Out.
Oh, yeah. And Far Out, that's really interesting because almost everybody has that, and almost everybody refers to it, it seems, perhaps continuously. So it's really interesting how people have changed how they, get information about the trail. And, I'm in Pennsylvania right now. Or actually, I'm sorry, I just crossed the water gap this morning. I'm in New Jersey. But
Right.
It's been darn dry. And we've had some really heavy water carries. And without a resource like Far Out that, has comments and tells you what water sources are good, what water sources are bad, you could get into a pickle. So
Absolutely.
It is a great resource.
Yeah, and in fact, of course, it's a dynamic app, and that's the important thing. You need something with comments from a day or so ago, or even the same day, don't you? And I think that's that's almost unstoppable. You just can't beat that, can you? So
you can't. No.
This can't just be a research project. I mean, this must be because you want to hike. Have you been hiking long?
Well, I'm from New Hampshire.
Uh-huh.
And
that's a good start. That's a good start. Yeah,
that's a good start. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in Scouts, and we hiked every month. I didn't do a lot of hiking in the Whites, but I went to summer camp in the Whites, and I've climbed some peaks.
Right.
I've been on Mount Washington several times, but always by the auto road, so I'm looking forward to actually climbing it. But yeah, I've enjoyed hiking for a long time.
But this is more than just some. This is more than just something which you enjoy, isn't it, though? Because this is a real commitment. Or are you actually treating it more of the work you're doing on sabbatical than the joy of the hike?
It's a little bit of both. One of the reasons I'm hiking is because I want to understand how people use trail guides, and I want to understand how I use the trail guides.
Right.
So it's it's part of the research.
So you obviously you got Far Out, I presume. Have you got the other guides as well? Or any of
I
the
do.
other
I have
guides?
all the other guides. Yeah.
Oh, that's surplus weight, David.
Well, I have the PDF versions of them.
Oh, right. Okay. Not so bad then. And are you finding things in them you didn't expect to find?
Not necessarily, because I've looked them over pretty carefully before I get out here.
Right.
But they are immensely useful, each in their own different way. The AWOL guide, the AT guide, is great for an overview. It provides information that Far Out doesn't provide, and vice versa.
Sure.
So having all of them is, some people, kind of the old timers you meet out here, the folks that are old school, they kind of look down on the use of apps and anything but the data book, which was what was only available for a number of years.
That's right. I've got that myself, actually. I had that for my 2014 through hike, funny enough. Yeah. And the ubiquity of Far Out is just complete. It was a complete changeover from 2014 to 2019 when I did my through hikes. In 2019, everybody had Far Out then. 2014, nobody. Well, I don't think it was even available then. So that's probably why, obviously. But that to use technology in the way it does, as I say, it's the dynamism of the app that's the critical thing. It's a game changer as far as I'm concerned.
It really is, and you can stop at any moment on the trail and find out exactly where you are. You can find out if you're not on the trail. If you think you're lost, you can get back on the trail.
Yeah, helpful.
Comments about hostels and restaurants and shuttles, and it's just it's a great resource.
So you just passed into Delaware Water Gap, which means you've just finished Pennsylvania. How was that for you?
Oh my God. The most challenging day that I had out here prior to Pennsylvania was when I was in the Smokies. I got extensor tendonitis and I had to take 2 weeks off the trail.
Oh gosh.
And coming down out of the Smokies was just excruciating that last day.
Yeah.
But the 4th of July in Pennsylvania, we did 22 miles.
Oh.
And water was scarce, so we had a full water carry. I had 5 liters of water, and it was raining at the end of the day. And I had plantar fasciitis, so my feet were like, ground beef. And it was just a hell of a day. But I have to say that at the end of the day, I stayed in the shelter that night, and I was trying to get to sleep, but there were fireworks booming in the distance, and I was kind of looking out through the woods, and I thought I saw the falling embers of the fireworks, but it turns out that they were fireflies. So I had my little fireworks show with fireflies at the end of the day, and that really kind of changed my attitude about it. And it was very beautiful.
That is so cool. And interestingly, because this is as much a project for you as a hike, how are you interacting with your fellow hikers? Are you enjoying that part of the trail, the community part of it?
Oh, absolutely. That's the very best part of this experience. As you know, I'm kind of hanging out with a couple different tramways, I would say. Autonomous hiking units, they call them now.
Right. Autonomous hiking units. Good Lord.
Yes. Have you heard that?
Oh, dear me.
But the people are just the very best. Non-judgmental, kind, generous, help you out. You know how it is out here.
I do. I think it's just wonderful. And so is this turning you into a backpacker? Is this the sort of thing you start thinking to yourself, you know what, this is something I could do more of?
It's certainly easy to get the bug out here, and I want to finish this trail and see how I feel. But my wife is also interested in hiking, and we like to do. I think we'd like to do some more. I'd like to get her out here and do this if possible.
Right. So what did she think when you said you were going to do this?
Well, we were actually planning to do it together. We worked together, and circumstances at work kind of changed, and we weren't able to do it together. So,
right.
I'm hoping she can get out here and experience it on her own, because it's just the most unique experience. It's the best experience of my life by far, I think.
How interesting. And, I'm glad you feel that way as well, because you could have come on it and literally hated it. So your sabbatical would have been a bit of a problem for you, wouldn't
it? Yeah. No, it's, one of the reasons, I'm out here because of the sabbatical, but also I'm out here because I want to experience the trail. And one of the reasons this appealed to me is because, if you ask the question, why are you out here? It's really because my life is too easy. I have a great family. I have a great job. I have no drama, no tragedy.
Nice.
And I just wanted to do something that, challenged me, made my life a little bit more interesting, and pushed me a little bit. So this is doing it.
Well, look, it's great to introduce you to the listeners. And I think, I don't think we've ever had somebody who's doing this as a sabbatical, which is quite an achievement, I tell you. And you're in your early 60s, I believe. Is that right?
I am 60, yep. 60.
Okay, right. Perfect age for it. Perfect. I started my first ever hike at 62, so perfect age for it. Okay, well, look, we're going to catch up again in a couple of weeks' time. And in the meantime, welcome to the show, and thanks for updating us on what your story is.
Okay, it's a pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, mate. Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.
He's doing it as a sabbatical. That seems a big commitment, yet, as you heard, he's embraced the trail and the people on it. Even though sabbatical and the study he's undertaking still stays at the top of mind. I admire him for that, though I'm not sure it would be something I could do. To be honest, just standing on my own 2 feet is always more than enough for me, but kudos to him. So, there were the 3 new members of our class of 24, with 1, maybe 2 more to come next week, as we start getting updates from the people we've already met. Now Emily Leonard reaches mountain crossings at Neil Gap. Always an early, though very big milestone in any AT through hike. For Emily, an injury has hit. I'll see you next week. Chapter 3. Rain. We woke to more rain. It poured all night, slowing our start. I'm an early bird. If the sun's up, I want to be up. If the sun's down, I'm also. Only day 2 and beginnings were already slow, mostly because it didn't even start to get light until 7 a.m. In the northeast, morning rays tickle the horizon about 5:30 a.m. in early March. Down south, daybreak is more like a teenager dreading a school morning. This confused the heck out of me. My physical being said, "It's time to rise," but my brain insisted on no such thing, since darkness still dominated. We woke to a drizzle, ate breakfast in a drizzle, broke camp in a drizzle, and said goodbyes in a drizzle. Bruce was headed back down the approach trail. He'd only joined us for the one overnight, which was probably a good thing. I wasn't sure I had enough food or supplies for him for the next 5 days. Besides, he had to go back to work. One of us had to bring in the dough. Might as well be him. He's much better at it than I am. After more hugs and kisses, from me, not Andrew, Bruce headed back to the car to catch a flight. Andrew, Moxie and I headed north in the rain. Despite the depletion of food rations consumed by Bruce and my decision to ditch a few miscellaneous items back in our room, my pack felt heavy. At least, it was not as weighty as if I'd chosen to carry the rain-soaked Hubba Hubba tent. I was glad we'd bought both options. It gave me a chance to see how each performed with last night's rain. Both had kept their contents dry, but the Cuban fibre tent didn't absorb any moisture and had less condensation build-up. The Hubba Hubba nylon freestanding tent offered easy setup with more headroom, but retained moisture, making it heavier and harder to pack. The winner was the Echo 2 tarp tent by Hyperlight Mountain Gear, and the Hubba Hubba went back down the mountain with Bruce. We started hiking at 9:30 a.m. Later, Bruce recalled that he thought we were never going to leave. There was a 3-hour delay from my preferred start time. I learned very quickly that Andrew was not a morning person. It rained all day. The first full day on the trail was wet. The only benefit was that it made water sources plentiful, unlike the day before. There's nothing like the taste of an ice-cold, fresh mountain spring. I can't recall many trail details those first few days, except that we were dirty and I could have planted a veggie garden under my nails. We hiked roughly 8 miles in 5 hours, just a little better than 1.5 miles per hour. Not really that bad considering it was only our second day of hiking and we had sloppy conditions. The trip had already produced an IT band issue for Andrew and 2 blisters for me, one on my left heel and one on my right fourth toe. Great, still 3 days and 23.6 miles until we reached Nil Gap. The Gap would be our first scheduled stop back in civilization, where Bruce, Jimmy and I believe would check to see how we were doing. Andrew had already mentioned a few times that he might consider going home when we arrived there. I hope not. I felt safe with Andrew and Moxie was so much fun to be around. I had not planned on having hiking partners, but now that I had them, I didn't want to give them up. Hawk Mountain Shelter was full. Hikers flooded the trail, preventing any chance of feeling alone or scared, or of enjoying welcome solitude. Excitement decorated the conversations, even with the rain. We were in the honeymoon stage of our grand adventures. Hell probably could have cast its wrath upon us, and we would have been glad it was warm. Bumpy, a fellow hiker, made friends with us. He was a quiet gentleman in his 60s. He liked Andrew and joined him at his tarp tent for an evening chat. Hidden in my abode, journaling, I overheard their conversation. Andrew shared with Bumpy that he might go home at Nil Gap. Bumpy commented to Andrew that he should stay on the trail because it would be good for him and having a nice, feisty hiking partner would help. Yeah, my head swelled just a tad. Day 3 and the honeymoon was over. We hiked to Gaasch Mountain Shelter, only a 7.7 mile day. It was one of ups and downs. The trail was smooth, following a ridge. One side of the trail sloped up while the other side dropped, with the 24-inch trail sculpted out. The incline or decline switched from left to right as switchbacks carved their way along the mountainside. The day's elevation started at 3209 feet and ended at 2821 feet, never dipping below 2619 feet. It would have been a nice, easy stroll if it had not been for the rain. Mother Nature cried all day and shed her last tears as we reached the shelter. The grey and gloom stifled my desire to take photos. Setting up the tent and cooking in the rain were even less desirable tasks that needed to be done. I didn't mind hiking in the rain, but it made everything else miserable. Add the cool mountain temperatures, I was not a happy hiker. I had to keep reminding myself that it was my choice to be out there and I could leave any time I wanted. Well, almost any time. First, I would need to hike to a road crossing. But leaving was not a choice. I was committed. I'm not a quitter. When I start something, I like to finish it. That doesn't always happen, but when I leave something unfinished, it drives me batty. One thing I did to help increase the odds of my success on this through hike was to be accountable, not just to myself, but to others. It's easy to give up when you are the only one holding yourself accountable, so I told everyone, and I mean everyone, I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. I figured the more people I told, the harder it would be to back out. I had 2 schools committed to following me, grades 4 and 5, at All Saints Catholic School in Bangor, Maine, and Enfield Station School 5th graders in Enfield, Maine. They were 2 schools I was associated with as a teacher, coach, and our sons had attended those schools. Once I began telling people about my plans, I was met with a wide range of responses. Most were very positive and very encouraging. I had little negativity about my abilities presented to my face. Who knew what was said when I wasn't present? I could tell by their responses and body language who believed in me and who didn't. Just like starting a new job, new hobby, new relationship or marriage, the honeymoon phase is exciting. It's fun, and one's blind to the nitty-gritty annoyances of that job, hobby, or other person. In fact, what we think are cute nuances in the beginning often become irritations after a while. Hiking was the same. Instead of taking months or years to discover the honeymoon was over, it took a short 72 hours. But just like all my other new quests, I took my newest adventure seriously and worked to bring joy back into what I was doing. It wasn't a one-time fix. I had to repeat this mindset often. It wasn't because I was having a terrible time on the trail. I would simply forget why I was out there. I let the little things get in the way of the bigger picture. I kept asking myself, is my why big enough? It's easy to quit when you reach a certain point. It's much harder to persevere. But when you persist and work through the struggles, whether you are long-distance hiking, tackling a project, or bringing spice back to your relationship, it is always worth doing. The honeymoon never has to be over. It's just a choice. Life is full of choices, and those choices can yield positive outcomes, bringing us joy, or yield consequences associated with great pain and anguish. Sometimes results are not apparent at first. Instead, they are cumulative. One decision after another decision, built upon the previous, producing either a positive or negative experience. A series of good choices over time begets great things, and a chain of poor choices yields unwanted results. We're a product of our decisions, whether we want to admit it or not. If I was to have a successful hike, I knew I needed to make a choice to not let the rain bother me, or I needed to just go home. It would be a decision I would have to make over and over again. I was sleeping in my tent again. I thought I might like shelter life, but we usually left late in the morning, and by the time we arrived at the end of the day, the shelters filled up. My chosen tent, with its big ticketed price tag, did not provide adequate headroom to spend hours in waiting out the rain. My short 5'3" of vertical dimension couldn't even sit up without cocking my head to one side. I was already thinking I needed a third tent. I decided against the hubba because it weighed too much when wet, but it was fast and easy to pitch. So I thought the Hubba, MSR's single version of the same tent, would be perfect. That purchase would have to wait though. Bruce may have cut into my food budget, but I had already spent our rainy day fund on the 2 tents I already owned. To make matters worse, my sleeping pad and sleeping bag were failing me in the comfort department. I'd chosen a 3/4 length version of a blow-up pad to save on weight and space. I really was trying to be a minimalist and learn to make do. My mummy's sleeping bag was too small, or I was too fat. Either way, I couldn't move around in it. My fear of being restricted often causes panic attacks. Back at Springer Mountain, I had mentioned to Sisu that I hated my mummy sleeping bag because of my issue with confined spaces. He joked and said I would learn to love it like a spouse. I doubted that. So here we were on the night of day 3, and I was not liking my gear. I had 2 more blisters, and Andrew was still thinking about leaving the trail, and it was raining. Again. The hike from Gaasch Mountain Shelter to Lance Creek camping area was beautiful. Day 4 was cloudy but rain-free, and a warm breeze helped to dry the sweat. In the few short days on the trail, we had learned being wet was just part of the deal. It was caused either by rain, sweat, or sometimes both at the same time. We welcomed the sunshine as the sweat soaked our clothes. The wind helped reverse the effects of the sun on our backs. The rain-free day gave us a chance to dry out our soaked boots and gear. Several times we were able to stop to air and powder our feet. This was crucial to getting the blister party on my feet down to a dull roar. At one point, we even took a long lunch break complete with a nap, my favourite. Just under 2 miles into the day's hike, we crested Ramrock Mountain at 3266 feet. It was our first real view of the journey. I cried. Andrew let me have my moment. It wasn't full-out crocodile tears, just a little sentimental sniffle and a single teardrop. I'm not a big waterworks emotional crybaby. I don't really cry at sad events or even when friends or family die. I am sad, I just don't show it. I'm more of an action-packed movie gal who enjoys thrillers like the Bourne movies and 24 series with Jack Bauer. The Saw movies were awesome. Just don't kill the dog. I'm more apt to cry at that and at happy times like weddings or, in that day's case, A Spectacular View. It's warped, I know, but what can I say? We experienced our first trail magic twice that day. A hiker named Nima was in the woods where the trail crossed a dirt road. She had a canopy set up, covering her outdoor camp kitchen, serving hot and cold beverages and a variety of foods. We helped ourselves to drink as Nima cooked breakfast. Enjoying the hot cocoa and snacks, the 3 of us, Moxie, Andrew and myself, posed for a photo that would be added to the Class of 2015 Hiker Yearbook. Later in the day, right about lunchtime, we exited the woods and found TikTok. a bearded old chap who was cooking up hot dogs. The large picnic table was filled with everything you could think of, from donuts, fruit juice, ham, bologna, condiments and more. The table was so full I couldn't even see everything. TikTok entertained us with conversation as we rested. When it was time to head on, we thanked him kindly for his generosity, and I took one piece of bologna to go. We were starting to recognise the other hikers in our bubble. A hiking bubble is a group of hikers who tend to end up in the same places, give or take a few days. It's the people you see consistently on the trail at any given time. We were in a very large bubble. Early March is a popular time for hikers to begin a northbound through hike, making our bubble quite big. After 4 days in the woods and meeting up at shelters or campsites, faces were becoming familiar. There were a lot of people on the trail. I saw about 30 new faces a day, but a few started to stand out. Here's an excerpt from my journal, briefly describing some of the original hikers I came in contact with in those first few days. Doug, looks like Buck from Band of Brothers. Kiwi, from New Zealand. Bumpy, old man we met at Amicalola Lodge breakfast. Gnome, looks like Santa Claus, really nice. Girl and guy couple, both quiet. He smiles a lot. Andrew and Armaeus, a guy and his Doberman. Ian, world religion major, taking a semester off. GA tech student, hiking with friends for a spring break. Nice kid. Hurt his knee, so they had to get off trail. Shrek and Donkey, Justin and his dog Lila, from Maine. Shrek was a big, burly, tattooed dude. Our first meeting was not a good one. He let his dog, Donkey, run free. She was a cute little thing and harmless, but it's wise to take precautions with strange animals on the trail. The trail not only changes people, but it can also have an impact on dogs. It's common for a loving family pet to become hostile. Dogs also get tired and sore. At that first meeting, Lila came running up to greet Moxie, who was on leash. Andrew held out his hiking stick to prevent any possible dog-to-dog contact and said to Shrek, "Do you mind?" Shrek looked like he could rip us to shreds with the flick of his wrist, but he was very polite. He called Lila back and said nothing in return. The next time we saw them, Shrek completely ignored us. But with each encounter over the beginning days, the friction eased. The dogs became best friends, and we discovered what a great guy Shrek was, and hopefully he thought the same of us. After the fourth day of hiking, home for the night became a designated campsite near Lance Creek. There was no shelter and barely a creek. Where had all the rain drained? There was only a trickle of runoff, which made collecting water for dinner and the next day laborious. Hikers were already occupying the spots close to the trail, so we followed an old leafed, overgrown road farther off the trail from the other tenters. Andrew and I each claimed our own piece of real estate, giving each other plenty of space so we could decompress alone. With a perfectly pitched tent, I set out to collect water. 2 others set up in the vicinity of Andrew. I was about 50 yards away all by myself. A solo hiker came through, looking for a spot. He was a strange one, dressed head to toe in camouflage, carrying a small, rough-looking pack. He dropped his load and set up his tarp a little too close for comfort. His tarp was also camouflaged, and he strung it out using guy lines to trees and weighted it with rocks. He then buried the edges with leaves. His whole setup was at the most 12 inches off the ground. Now that was primitive camping. I would have been impressed if I wasn't so scared of him. I took my dinner over to where Andrew was and asked if he minded if I moved closer to him. I didn't want to be near Rambo. Andrew prejudged the hiker, and so did the other 2 hikers. They all had the same uneasy feeling. Once my tent was repositioned, we went from acres of privacy to crowded condominiums where our own guy lines almost crossed. But I felt safe. I found out later the hiker's name was Finn. He was a nice guy, and we eventually became Facebook friends. To this day, I still have not told him how he freaked me out the first time I saw him. There are 4 Finns in the class of 2015 hiker yearbook, so if you think you know him, you have a 1 in 4 chance of being right, or a 75% chance of being wrong. Either way, don't tell him our secret. The freaky feeling continued. I woke to the thunderous sound of a single aircraft with huge bright lights skimming the treetops. I immediately thought of the UFO shows, where a redneck southerner with missing teeth tells of his encounter with an unidentified flying object in the night sky. I thought to myself jokingly, it's actually true. The next day, I asked if anyone else saw or heard the mysterious flyover. I was the only one. How could they have missed it? It was just over the treetops and the lights were so bright and the noise deafening. Friday the 13th. I should have known then why the day was so miserable, but it never entered my mind. I didn't even realise the date until just now as I'm reviewing my journal. It started raining about 15 minutes into the day, and it continued that way until the end of the day's hike. We began with warm temperatures, but as we climbed up Blood Mountain at over 4,400 feet elevation, the warmth evaporated and was replaced by cold rain. Blood Mountain was all hyped up by many of the other hikers. It's the highest peak in Georgia on the Appalachian Trail and the 6th tallest mountain in the state. According to Wikipedia, Blood Mountain is the high point of the Apalachicola River watershed via the Chattahoochee River, making it the highest point of any land draining to the state of Florida. Most hikers were worried about the hike up the mountain and how difficult it was going to be. Other than the misery of the rain and cold when we reached the top, Andrew and I thought, so this is it? If it wasn't for the sign and survey marker designating the summit, we wouldn't have even known we were at the top. We didn't think it was that difficult of a climb, and with the rain and clouds obscuring any possible view, we didn't realise we had hiked so high. The guidebook stated there was self-service at the top of the mountain, and it was advisable to call Blood Mountain cabins for a reservation, especially in bad weather, since they fill up quickly. Mountain Crossing, an outfitter, also had bunks available, but it was first come, first serve. We didn't know what we were doing. Bruce, Jimmy and I believe were going to meet us, but we didn't have any details. If it wasn't for this fact, I could have stayed at the top in the shelter, although it wasn't very inviting. Blood Mountain Shelter was originally built in the 1930s using local stone. It's primitive and creepy looking, with its paneless windows and graffiti, not to mention the history behind the area. There are different stories on how the mountain got its name. The possibilities range from the red lichen growing near the summit to a bloody battle between the Cherokee and Creek Native Americans. Also in 2008, a young female hiker went missing on a nearby trail, and later a man confessed to a murder. The weather was miserable and I just wanted to get out of the rain. As I passed the decrepit shelter, I didn't really give serious thought to staying there. I gave it a fleeting glance and continued on for the 2.4-mile descent into Neal Gap, where our chariot would be waiting. I had made our call at the summit. According to the voice on the phone, the climb down would take 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on one's fitness level and the weather. I was fairly fit, but it was raining. I estimated it would take me 45 minutes. 10 minutes into the downslope, my left knee started giving me trouble. 15 minutes in, it was screaming at me. It had not bothered me at all so far, and out of nowhere, I became a hobbling hiker. I had to limp the rest of the way down, taking the downhill steps leading with my left, then followed by the right. It was so slow and cold. My pace was not fast enough to keep my body warm. The physical pain was made worse by the mental pain I was suffering. Another hiker had caught up to me. I called him Bottles because he carried 3 aluminum bottles attached to the outside of his pack. They swayed freely and clanged annoyingly like some giant wind gong. I never saw them full. Bottles and I had flip-flopped a few times over the last several days. I thought I had seen the last of him when he was struggling to climb up Blood Mountain earlier, as I passed him with ease. But with my failing knee, he now caught up to me and actually gained the advantage. Not that hiking was a race, I was just trying to distance myself from the annoying sound. I don't like irritating sounds. I thought it was just a pet peeve. It's actually a syndrome called misophonia. I had proof from my family and friends that I wasn't crazy. I had scored 7 out of 10 in severity in an online self-testing. I'd been able to use avoidance tactics and hike ahead of Bottles, which prevented me from losing my mind from the clang, clang, clang of Bottles swaying with his side-to-side stride. I didn't get that either. He seemed to need a lesson in physics. Not that I'm a scholar in the field. I have a mathematical handicap, but this guy was wasting so much energy with his side-to-side momentum. Hadn't he heard of Sir Isaac Newton? He tired me out just watching him. At times I so wanted to help Bottles with another law of motion. An object in motion stays in motion until acted upon by an outside force. I wanted to be that force. With one little push I could have helped him down the mountain and the wind gong would be gone. With only one good knee, my pace slowed, and I was now forced to listen to the noise most of the way down the mountain. Thank goodness he had to stop and rest. I was able to pass him, freeing myself from the mental pain once again. I never saw or heard him after that. An hour and a half after I took my first step from the summit, I arrived at Mountain Crossing, Neal Gap, Georgia. I was more than a little off on my estimated arrival time. This is the first milestone for thru hikers. Mountain Crossing is a full-service outfitter, and the Appalachian Trail passes right through it. They offer a range of services catering to hikers, including a pack shakedown where they will go through your pack and tell you what you really need and what you should ship home, another service they gladly do for a small fee. 20 to 30% of hikers choose to leave the trail here. Some people call them quitters, some call them smart. I say, hike your own hike. I was wondering if Andrew had decided to end his hike. He and Moxie were already at Mountain Crossing. He had offered to stay back and hike with me, since my knee hurt so badly, but I knew I'd be okay. No sense all of us suffering in the terrible weather. The trail leads under a stone archway connecting to the outfitter. It's here where I found my two very unhappy, soggy and slightly hypothermic hiking partners. The blog I was writing, hosted by the Bangor Daily News, may have been titled Happy Hiking, but I was far from a happy hiker at that moment. The three of us looked like shivering, drowning rats, and there was no chariot waiting for us. It would be another 30 minutes before it arrived. I was able to make contact with our support crew, Jimmy, I Believe and Bruce. Hubby wasn't landing in Atlanta till 4:30 p.m. and still had to make the drive over. It was 1:30 p.m. Andrew and I took rotations, watching our gear and going to the store to warm up. It wasn't long before Jimmy and I Believe pulled up. I felt bad that we were so wet and dirty, but they were all too accustomed to hiker grime. They protected the seats with towels, and we climbed in.